Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few moments, we're going to have Bob Greaves, the Unconventional pastor, here to say something once again that will amaze your mind and make you think all day tomorrow. In the meantime, our very own Bob Greaves has written some music. He started to write some intros for our various shows, and tonight we're going to start with his. So we hope you enjoy this intro composed by Bob Greaves himself, and here we go.
Well, good evening. This is Bob Greaves. They call me the Unconventional Pastor, and it's good to be back with you again on this Wednesday evening. Tonight, I hope to complete and finish up this series that I've been doing here, starting last Wednesday and continuing Sunday. And I have given this talk before in other contexts, and I call it Just Who Do You Think You Are? And in this series, I've been trying to talk about how it is we come to understand who it is we are. Now, you might be wondering why I'm actually doing this. I found that as I was growing up, and early on, I didn't really ask that question very much. Who am I? I didn't ask it because I felt I knew. I was a loser. I was a person who was no good. I was a person who was stupid and incompetent. I knew quite clearly who I was, and I didn't even ask the question. I remember being in an assembly when I was a teenager and listening to a speaker talking to the kids and saying, "You're at that age where everyone's asking, who am I? What am I going to do?" And I couldn't even relate to it because I knew exactly who I was. I was a huge loser. I remember one time walking home and seeing this car parked out in front of the house. And as I come in, I discovered that it's a gentleman there who's there to date one of my older sisters. And they were getting ready to go out to the movie. And I remember when I saw that car and saw that fellow and knew that they were going out for a date, I knew that I was such a loser that I'd probably never date. I'd probably never have a good enough job or enough money, never own a car. And part of the reason why that was the way I understood myself, I really just kind of coping and getting by, faking it, as it were. It was the way I perceived it. I grew up in a home where, although my mother wouldn't have articulated it this way, my mother hated men. And she loved her son, but she hated men, and I was on my way to becoming one. And so she had this real ambivalent, vague, hug and a punch kind of relationship with me. And I felt at that time, I don't think I would have articulated it quite that way. It wasn't until later that I came to see it that way. But I felt that simply just being me was almost a betrayal of my mother, and just had that feeling vaguely. But my dad was an extremely critical person. He was not an emotionally violent person. He was very matter of fact, kind of like being raised by Captain Spock on Star Trek, where everything he said was very, very logical, very well stated. He was a highly intelligent person. He had an amazing career in terms of doing many intellectually stimulating things. I mean, my dad was even when he graduated from college, he was taken under the wing of Albert Einstein, and he knew Albert Einstein, who ended up recommending him to a number of other projects. And Einstein even attended my father's seminars on the stress analysis of metal alloys we used in construction and bridges and automotive science and stuff like that. But so he was a very intelligent fellow, but he was always very critical of me. And at the time, I didn't really have a perspective of it. I just was the object of that criticism. And basically, though, I think later I finally came to the conclusion that my father's real problem with me is that I didn't somehow come out of the womb already fully prepared to be a well-versed, well-educated human being who knew everything. And it was in some ways a disappointment to him, but I think he also had this ambivalence. And then I think my father was, I think he felt threatened by the possibility that one of his children might actually be as smart as he is or something, and so between all this criticism and this hug and a punch and all that, I grew up in a home where I had a very clear sense of the fact that I was a loser. And when I became more involved in Christianity, and particularly at around the age of 18, when I started pursuing fundamentalism, it was my hope that I might find some way out of all of that. And I didn't. I found that my Christianity instead found another way of confirming that same message. I'm just a sinner by nature. I'm just no good. Without Jesus covering over me, I'm just a stench to the nostrils of God. I disgust him deeply. And my sense of self was merely in the hands of a benevolent bully under God. And that wasn't really too much different from my parents, because to be honest with you, I don't think my parents hated me in a sense. I don't think that they thought like, oh my God, we got this kid we're cursed with. I don't think that they felt that way. I think they wanted to do right by me. My mother was just disappointed I was going to become a man, and my father was disappointed I wasn't already the man I'm supposed to be just the moment I came out of the womb, and then when I did develop, that was, I think, threatening to him. So I had to point out all those errors I was making, and maybe he was insecure in his own way. I don't know. I can't really begin to do anything but guess as to what their actual intents, motives, and concerns and problems were. Never got a chance to discuss them with either of them, really. But anyhow, I found that my own pursuit into a fundamentalist faith only confirmed with another layer in a different way that same loser mentality. But I did discover that there were other people who were Christians who, although they believed this theology, it didn't seem to bother them. I mean, the truth is, when I believed that I was a sinner by nature, I disgusted myself. And these people didn't seem to be disgusted by themselves. And I thought, well, if you really believe this, how can you like yourself? How can you do that? It didn't seem to me to be honest. And I struggled with that. And I got to be honest with you. I finally came to the conclusion that these people weren't being honest, that they believed this because it was enjoyable to them to think of it as so. It gave to them a kind of a proud sense of humility to admit it. But I think they really thought they were pretty hot stuff, and they enjoyed the way that this teaching helped them to keep others down. And I began to see it as really nothing more than a cliquish technique used to, put oneself ahead artificially with humility while keeping others down. And there was not that much genuineness to it. And the people that struck me as being people who took this teaching seriously, they seemed to be deeply troubled people like me, and so it wasn't working for me. And as I came out of that fundamentalism, I began to discover who I was, and so I going through a process of really more honestly, more earnestly, based on facts, based upon reality, based upon a genuine and honest assessment of my experience, I began to discover who I am, and that I can know that, and that I'm not the person I thought I was. There really was an entirely different person inside that was there all along, trying to get out, trying to emerge, but had been thrown all of these obstacles in my way. And I found that my Christianity was actually part of what impeded my self-discovery. And since many of the people in my audience are people who have come out of institutional Christianity, I am going to guess that you too had a very similar experience. Maybe not the exact same one, maybe not in the same way or to the same degree. Could have been worse, could have been less, whatever. But anyhow, this may not be a nice or kind thing to say about fundamentalism, but I think you really have to be kind of down on yourself to begin with in a very unfair and dishonest, not deliberately dishonest, but in an unjustifiable way. You have to be kind of down on yourself just to find that kind of theology to make sense to you. I think you have to be a person who does have a little sliver of self-hatred going on there, some self-loathing. And the reason I want to talk about this is because if you've been through that, chances are as you come out, you may not have yet gone through a process that helped you discover, well, who you really are. And so that's why I asked this question tonight. Just who do you think you are? And hopefully I can help you discover that. Now, I got to be also honest with you that it was actually an odd experience that I had that was the beginning of my self-discovery. I'll never forget the day. I was sitting on a couch in my living room at that time. I was in a previous marriage. This was back in the 70s. And I was reading the section where Peter comes out after Pentecost and preaches, and so many thousands of people were just powerfully affected by his message. And I looked at that text of scripture and I realized Peter was not a loser like I am. He didn't seem to discuss the Holy Spirit like I do. And I realized that I was never going to be like Peter. Nothing was going to make that happen. I was never going to preach and have the Holy Spirit attend to my message, and it was going to affect 3,000 people, and I was just useless. But while I was thinking about that, a question occurred to me that, well, you're not perfect, and you're all hung up, and you've got obsessions, and you've got problems, and you've got difficulties. Could you walk away from those difficulties and just stop being the horrid, awful person you are? And I thought, well, no, I can't. And I don't know where these thoughts came from, but the next thought to me was, well, what if, hypothetically, hypothetically somehow something goes wrong in heaven, and you got Jesus here, and he ends up having to just go to hell forever. But this Jesus who loved me and all that other stuff. And of course, you remember, I'm in a context of still having a fundamentalist faith. Let's say the only way he's going to get out of that trouble there that he's in now is if I will walk away from every sin. Can I do that? And I realized that, honestly, I couldn't and I wouldn't, even if that was going to be the cost. And that was when I saw myself, I would say, as such an enemy to God, where I'd rather he go to hell than I walk away from my sinful, wicked, awful, horrible self. And in that moment, I hit a pinnacle, a peak of self-loathing. I hated myself so much. I thought I really reached a peak of self-disgust. And I knelt down and I prayed, and I just begged God to put me into hell. I wanted to go to hell immediately. I didn't want anything more to do with ruining the earth with my foul presence, And it was an intense prayer. And while I was praying, I blacked out and went into a vision. I don't want to talk too much about it. It doesn't usually create the kind of response that I think is useful. Some people, when I talk about it, are like, oh wow," and it wasn't really that kind of a thing, not to me. Um, and, I mean, it was certainly an amazing thing, but that wasn't the point. And others think it's kind of bizarre and weird or whatever, and no doubt was. But so I'm not going to go into too many details. But in this vision, which lasted for must have been at least just shy of an hour. Um, as that progressed, I found myself surrounded by this love, where my name was called out. Bob, I love you, I love you, and it was so confusing to me. There was just nothing but this love and a sense of being loved, a sense of being caressed, a sense of being embraced, a sense of being delighted in, almost as if God couldn't contain his joy over just how lovely I was to him. And it didn't make any sense to me. It didn't make any sense to my theology and none of that. But I was one of these people. I didn't believe in any of that charismatic stuff or visions or anything like that. No. That's all of the devil. And when this came to an end, I'm kind of like, what do you do with that? I couldn't make sense of it. It didn't fit into anything that I could figure out. And but that sense of being lovely to God never left me. And I can say this, that since the 70s, there has never been a moment in my life since where I felt disgusting. And now my theology was still there, but it now felt so disingenuous to me. It was like, well, I believe that, but I really don't. And it was a sense, but this was the beginning of that freedom. And I would say it took me almost 5 to 7 years after that experience, struggling with what it meant or what it implied, and beginning to notice different things in the text of Scripture than I'd ever noticed before. And it began, the old way of thinking just began falling away. It lost its ability to sustain itself. And then I only found that by doing honest study of secular knowledge, studying psychology, human development, anthropology, sociology, and trying to understand what human beings have discovered and know about human beings, that I was able to actually put into what I think was a well-educated, understood sense of who I am and how I came to think of myself the way that I do. And I realized that that is something that a lot of Christians would probably have derailed for them in the process of their life. So that's why I'm kind of going through this. I'm thinking that chances are a lot of you listening would have had a similar experience to that. And not all of you, thankfully, but many of you. So previously, we talked about this in a manner where we talked about some of these processes, and the details are so involved that we really have to go through this in just a summary of notions. But basically, what I ended up saying in the previous two sessions that we talked in this was that we actually come to see ourselves as participants in a world filled with things that are going on and that are going on as a result of causality. Something is causing them, and sometimes we're the cause, and sometimes other people are the cause, and sometimes the cause is something we can't identify. But basically, it's either internal to ourselves or external from ourselves, or it's unidentified. And it's actually, as you get more sophisticated, a combination of all those things. And that as we did that, I found that that in this, I began to realize that all human beings develop several habits of observation that become the core way that they make sense of the world, the way they make sense of things, the way they make sense of the universe, and they use these exact same tools in the way they make sense of themselves. And that is this: they rely on general observations. They rely to a degree on just what they happen to notice about themselves. They also then rely upon observations that are made during the processes of change. When change is going on, either they're changing or things around them are changing. and they see how it is they ride through that change. And that those observations sometimes contribute to them things that make them conclude, oh, then I must be this, and this must be true about me. And the other third way that tends to be the most dominant way all human beings learn to think about everything and make sense of it is they see other human beings relate to either themselves or to other people, and in a way that somehow they make sense of as how that says something about themselves. Maybe it's people who are in their lives, influences. But the point that needs to be made is that not only do we rely on general observations, observations of the process of ourselves in the processes of change, either changes around us or changes in us, and relationships, but that we make these observations based in a manner highly influenced by other people. It is other people who are often telling us what these things mean, what these things are. The observations we're making are oftentimes things they've pointed out to us, or that they have dealt with us in such a manner as it causes us to focus on such things. And as a result, all of the observations we've made that were a core part of our development were made starting very early on in our age when we possessed no real critical thinking skills to know whether or not we're being honest, fair, kind, appropriate, or even accurate in terms of those. And not that, but many times those observations are forced upon us by people who would far rather we take a role in life that works for them than works for us. There's a little bit of hostility in that world. And so therefore, we've come to a core set of beliefs about ourselves at a time when we don't really possess the competency to have done that very well. And as it goes on, it becomes cyclical. It builds on from there and rarely gets challenged. It tends to just get confirmed. Now, I did say this, that every memory you have that stands out becomes for you a metaphor. You see yourself in every memory as playing a certain role, and the role you see yourself playing in that memory tells you who you are. But all of the things that have happened in your life is just, that's a lot of stuff to review. But as it happens, the way life works out, there are some times when you go through a particular period of time and you remember this, that seems to tell you one or two things. But then there are those few rare moments in life where there's so much going on at the same time that you're observing that you see so much of yourself in so many ways that becomes a memory that stands out far above all the others. It is a memory where you see so many different qualities about yourself or features about yourself as actively involved in that particular event, that event stands out to you as an excellent example of telling other people who you are and telling yourself who you are. Sort of like when you write a story in a movie or in a novel, you might want to share with your audience who this character really is. So you might invent this scene where the way they interact, the things they say, and what's going on gives you multi-axial information on so many different levels of who this person is. You leave that paragraph or those paragraphs or that scene in the movie knowing a great deal about that person, about many aspects of who they are. And this is true in our lives. There are certain memories that rise to the top, as it were, even if they're unconsciously held onto, that seem to be a memory that has a strong representation of numerous features. All the other memories that you have are merely, they merely confirm those things. And what I was saying in the second session was this, that when it comes down to it, the truth is, if you could think of, say, about a dozen memories you have where you noticed something about yourself just in general, and if you were to kind of recite for us what happened, what was going on, what you were doing, what was going on around you, what you were wearing, what you heard, what you smelled, what you felt during that moment, and what it was you observed about yourself during those general observations that really stand out to you, you might not realize it, but you would start to tell your story. you would start to be telling us who it is you think you are. And the same thing is true if we rehearsed and were to kind of then go over the events where we observed ourselves in processes of change, either changes we were going through or changes that were going on around us. And if those ones where we made certain observations about ourselves that really stand out, that we really resonated with, we said, that's me. And we were to then express to others what was going on there, what was changing, how did I ride through that change, what was going on, and why did that stand out to me, and what was significant about it, I would end up telling, again, my story. And if I were to take a look at the people in my life that I have observed and seen that made me think about myself, or that made certain things about myself stand out to me, and I were to do this, I would find that maybe about a half a dozen such memories would rise to the surface that really did this in a far more thorough way. And same thing with the observations of change. There'd be about a half a dozen there. So you got about a dozen general observations, about a half dozen observations during processes of change, and about a half dozen events that happened in your life that involved the way other people were relating to either someone else or to you, that spoke to you about yourself. You would end up with a list of about 24 memorable moments in your life where these events spoke to you. They told you who you are. And if you could remember those events and write down the details of what was going on and what you were doing, what you were feeling, what you were thinking, what was happening, you would end up writing an extremely thorough story that would help us to understand who it is you think you are. Now, if you could do that, you could then also re-examine those events and ask yourself, now, wait a minute. Is that really who I am? Here I am, I'm being dealt with by some of these school bullies, as it were, and I'm feeling like, well, I can't win. Well, look who you're up against. Is this really the proper conclusion? Most bullies have some experience in intimidating others, and this may have been one of your first experiences, and you don't have any experience in knowing how to deal with a bully. You might not have the particular strength or whatever. And bullies don't pick on just anybody. They pick on people they think are going to be easy targets. So maybe you were at a point in your life to be doesn't say anything about you. It says more about how they selected you. But you're just beginning. They may have been older or whatever. But however, when you look back at these memories, you can re-examine the conclusions that it caused you to draw about yourself, and really ask yourself, is that a real proper conclusion? Is that a conclusion that loves me? Is that a conclusion that is honest? Is that a conclusion that is justifiable? Or is that just a conclusion that makes sense to a little child, a young person going through that, or even an adult going through that moment, already having been damaged by previous events that set you up for that being an unsuccessful event? Now, some people can actually recall many of these events that told them who they are, and they were very positive events. And chances are there will be a mixture of very positive and not positive events that you went through in that sense. And sometimes you can even go through a negative event, but come out with a positive sense of it. Like, if you may have been the object of somebody's tormenting, and you realize that, well, I must be a threat to these people who feel a need to torment me. And if that was the kind of conclusion you drew about yourself, it could have been a negative event, but a very positive attitude about yourself that came out of that event. The point being is that by rehearsing these events, you can see how these events in your memory became for you metaphors that tell your story. You can, and I'll tell you this, as long as those memories are significant to you in the way that they're significant to you, you're going to think that this is who you are, and you cannot escape that until you learn to see those memories in a very different way. And once you do, when you come to view yourself as playing a very different role, as representing very, very different features in those events, as you do that, as you re-examine those events, what's going to happen is this. some of those events are going to cease to be significant to you. You're going to dismiss them as really saying anything about you. Some of them will remain significant, but they will tell you something very different than they used to. You'll begin to see something very, very different. And also, there will be other events in your past that'll begin to emerge as some of those pass away that you end up being able to dismiss. Other ones will kind of rise to take their place. And that's important to understand because, as it turns out, it really has something to do with our biological hardwired brains. That the brain seems to be able to keep those memories at about 24 of them as active operations. It's kind of like this. If I was to ask you to remember 3 numbers in a row, okay, 7, 21, 15. Most of you could repeat that, 7, 21, 15. And now if I give you 4 numbers, a lot of you could do that. Once we get beyond 7 numbers, most people start, no, what was those numbers you gave me? And you start losing. As it turns out, just the natural biological structure of the human brain seems to be able to very easily connect about a dozen general observations to any particular object that stand out as very quick reference metaphors. The human brain seems to have this ability to hold on to about a half a dozen events and memories of a particular object as it was involved in processes of change, and use that as also a way of reminding yourself what that thing is. And the human brain seems to do that also with the way people relate to it. So that by the time you're done, it's as if your brain has all these little niches that for every object in your world of reality that you know, there's going to be about 24 memorable events with that object that stand out to you, even if you don't necessarily think of them consciously, that tell you what that object is. And you can be one of those objects that this tells you. That means that as some of these memories might be dismissed, other ones will rise up to take their place because these niches seem to just naturally exist in the human brain, the way that it organizes itself and the way that it organizes reality and the way that the human brain operates in terms of its internal apparatus and psychology and emotional apparatus and all that. So, but the good news about that is this. That being the case, this means you don't really have to review your entire life to try to figure out if you've made some mistakes in understanding who you are and in coming to that gut level core truth feeling of who it is you are. You can just re-examine some of those most outstanding memories that resonate. Now, once you've done that, you'll find that a lot of things are changing. But that might give you the impression that, well, hey, wonderful, we're now done. No. It's going to take you a lot of time to get through that. You've got a lot of work to do that. But also, as you do that, you will find it starts to precipitate real powerful changes in you. You start to emerge as a person very different. I mean, today, I'm a person who, although I hope I don't come across as arrogant, maybe sometimes I do, I'm a person who feels rather confident about my abilities. I know I can't do everything, but I think there's a lot of things I do very well. I like me. I'm not disgusted by me in the least. I'm not ashamed to be me. I like being me. I think I'm a good person. I like being me. I also don't see myself as being particularly unique among individuals in terms of whether or not I'm valuable. I'm just as valuable as everyone else, and I think everyone else is as valuable as I am. So I don't see myself as being, head and shoulders above other people in terms of my value. But I see a lot of people who have been impeded in a manner similar to me, who would do well to think of themselves very differently. If they could find a way. But also, just because you're going to have to go through this process of reworking it, and that you're never going to be done with that process to the day you die, you're going to discover something. As you begin to make changes, this is going to change you, and it's not going to just change you, it's going to change the role you play in life. It's going to change the way you relate to other people. It's going to change the rules. And there's going to be a lot of other people who don't like this. Well, for one thing, for example, if you are surrounded by bullies and you find yourself becoming a person who's not going to put up with that, who's going to find an effective way of dealing with it, well, they're not going to like that. If you are a person who has a certain role in life and you come from a certain background and you're not supposed to rise to a certain level in life or something, you're going to find that people who are already there, they don't want you there. not all of them, but some of them. In other words, you're going to find that there are going to be other people, some who mean well, some who don't mean anything kind at all, who are going to become a new obstacle to make sure you do not leave that sense of just who it is you think you are. They need to keep you down. This could be even your spouse. It could be your kids. It could be your parents. It could be your best friends. It could be the church. It could be anybody. But you're going to find that the world has adjusted to find a way of working the way that it does with you being who it is you think you are. And when you start changing that, it rearranges all the negotiated relationships that you have. And that's going to upset the apple cart. And so consequently, you are going to find other people are going to be in resistance to your becoming who you are. And I want you to know something. You're going to have to come up to a point of resolve. You're going to have to decide that they mean well or they don't mean well, but it doesn't matter. If they don't mean well, they just don't know who they are. They feel they need to be somebody mean in order to survive. And that's sad, but that's their problem. It isn't your problem. It's their problem. You have to commit yourself to being someone who will love others, but you also have to commit yourself to saying, I am going to become me. And that is not going to be negotiated away, period. That's what it took for me. I had to discover I was going to find out who I am, and I was not going to let anything or anybody stop me. And if there was anything or anybody in my way, I was going to seek to find a proper, loving, and justified way of thinking things differently, doing things differently, until I overcame those obstacles. Nothing is going to keep me from being who it is I really am. I'm going to discover that. And I had to make that as a genuine commitment. So you're going to discover that there are people who will actually want to get in your way. And you're going to have to find ways of dealing with that. You need to prepare for those significant challenges. Now, those other people out there in this world, let's talk about just you for a moment. Let's forget about everybody else, okay? I want to talk to you about you. I don't want to badmouth those other people, the other people in your life. They don't mean to be a problem, many of them. Some of them who do, you can find a way around it. But you need to come to a point where you're going to have a really proper and good relationship with yourself. You got to learn to like you. You have to learn to realize this is your life. This is your opportunity. And it is only going to become what, within the options that are available to you, you can make of it. And are you going to take this bull by the horns or not? I want to encourage you to realize you need to do that. Not only do you need to do that for you, you need to do that for me. You need to do that for the people around you. We really need you to be the person you are. The wonderful person that can emerge out of you when you really are who you really are is an amazing asset to the relationships and this world. And we need you. So you need to make this commitment and forget about what all those other people may want for you. They don't know what they're doing, and they don't mean to. They don't understand what they're doing, or they're dealing with their own problems. So let's forget about them for just a moment, okay? Not everybody has relationships with healthy people. Not all of us are as healthy as we could be. And as a result, we are involved with a variety of people who have a lot of their own problems, a lot of their own issues, a lot of their own impediments. And so we have to find a way of dealing with the difficulties that they're going to present to us. Now is this time to really deal with reality. And here's one reality check you don't want to bounce. Not everybody has the best of intentions. They don't. There will be a few people who will deliberately be antagonistic towards you as you begin to go through changes, as you begin to become somebody else you've never been before. And these people are going to do things where they feel inconvenienced by you. They feel inconvenienced and threatened by the changes. They might not like it if you change. They might not like how you spend your money now. They might not like how you spend your free time, or if you modify your social, religious, or political opinions. You know what? They might not like it, but that's just going to have to be their problem. You may find others would support you wonderfully, but And there will be a few who will, and you want to attract yourself other people who will be very supportive of you becoming everything you can be, and the person you are. Uh, so you got to find ways of responding to these people who will stand in your way empathetically, but firmly, until you change how you see yourself. And here's something that's radically important. Until you change how you see yourself, you are the only person who's really obstructing your positive changes. When you realize that, that becomes very powerful and empowering. Until you change how you see yourself, you are the only one obstructing your positive change. And when you change how you see yourself, there's hardly anything that can hold you back. Now, let's talk about some of the changes we could make. Many of us try to change our lives by trying to change our circumstances. Oh, if only I had more money. If only I had a better job. If only I had more education. If only I had. Oh, it's true that better circumstances could be better for most of us. But you want to know what's true? If you were to take any human being out of a bad circumstance, just take them out of that and put them into a better circumstance, you know what you find? 99 times out of 100, they will take that new circumstance and in a short period of time turn it into something just as horrible as the old circumstance was. Because the reason why many of us are in very difficult circumstances has nothing to do with the circumstances. It has to do with who it is we see ourselves are. It has to do with who it is you think you are, and you're actually finding your role in the circumstances as events go on. So I take you and put you into a new circumstance. You begin to just be who you think you are in that new circumstance, and next thing you know, you're back in the same role you were always in before. One of the ways that this is obviously true is, somebody wins the lottery. They win $5 million in the lotto, more money than some of us will ever make in a lifetime. And they got $5 million. And yet 10 years later, they're just as poor as they were before they ever won the lotto. And they don't have any of the money of people who actually spent their whole life accumulating $5 million and who will be wealthy for the rest of their lives in their retirement. Why? Because they didn't change. I want you to understand something. Changing your circumstances is one of the weakest ways of making real changes in your life. The most powerful change you can make is by changing who it is you think you are. When you change who it is you think you are, circumstances don't stand a chance. This is going to change your circumstances from where you are. You don't have to find new circumstances. You can change them right where you are. Now, let me talk to you about some of the things you're going to run into. You're going to run into people who want to guide you and influence you. Well, some of these people mean well, and some of them will actually do well. But a lot of people who try to be consultants and experts in your life are really trying to control you. They're actually people who, in some ways, they're trying to kindly help you because deep down inside, they don't believe in you. And their guidance is kind of a way of trying to head off the trouble they think you're headed for. And you know what? You might be headed for trouble. But guess what? If you are who you are, you'll run into that trouble. You'll figure out what you're doing and you'll do something different and you'll learn. A true guide, a true influence, a person who is an excellent mentor is somebody who believes in you, recognizes you're going to be making some mistakes, but that you're going to learn from those mistakes. They want to give you nurturing insight. They want you to expand your skills. They want you to become the expert in your life. They don't want to be the expert without whom you cannot survive. So as you look to other people, you will need the insight and wisdom and guidance of other people. You don't want to have to make all the mistakes of the universe before you can learn what you need to do. You want to learn from the things others can teach you, but you want to make sure that you limit the kind of impact that other people who would like to help you do in helping you and making sure that they're not really people who are putting you down. There's also going to be people in your life who think, well, you're going to hurt yourself. They want to protect you. They don't think you have what it takes. And so, don't get hurt. Don't you launch out in that area. Who do you think you are? And they're just worried that you're going to hurt yourself before it gets too late. And they're going to try and talk you out of doing some things differently when you decide to start changing the way you're dealing with things. Well, you might want to listen to their advice in terms of if there's any wisdom in it. I mean, it's not as if you can just do anything you want to. But at the same time, I would not allow these people to keep you from making proper proper changes that you need. Viewer comment here. You should be a motivational speaker, Bob. This is great. Well, thanks. uh, who knows? Maybe someday we'll do something like that. There are also people in your life. Thank you. There are also people in your life who will be what I would call self-protectors. They're not interested in protecting you; they're interested in protecting themselves, and they're going to be levelers. Levelers are sometimes obvious, and sometimes they're not. Levelers are people who say things to you in a way where they're trying to bring you down. They think you need to be knocked down a notch, and really, what they're doing is this: they feel you're a threat. When you start becoming the real you, my goodness, you're a threat to who they are, and they can't let that happen. And so they're going to do everything in the world they can to make sure they knock you down a bit. And they don't like the changes you're going through. It makes life harder for them. Well, I don't think we want to deliberately make life harder for somebody else. But if life is harder for somebody else because you're being you, that's just too damn bad for them. They're going to have to find out how they can be successful simply being themselves without your having to be who they need you to be. And so you need to find a way of negotiating this and realizing that, hey, I don't have to cut my own nose off to make other people feel comfortable. I'm not going to do that. These people are really in some ways anxious about themselves. They're uncertain about your changes. They're worried about what this is going to do in their lives. Now, we only have about a minute left to this show. And I want to tell you that there's another thing that I would encourage you to do. You're going to run into a variety of people who are going to stand in your way for various different reasons. But be prepared to deal with them lovingly and empathetically. But do not compromise on this mission of your becoming who you are. Don't do it. I didn't. And it's just improved a lot of things in my life. But the last thing I want to talk to you about on this is this. I became what I call a multi-axial thinker. I learned to think of myself on a wide variety of different possibilities. There's some things I don't know about myself. It's either this or that or this or that, and all a bunch of very good possibilities. But I don't really have to even settle on anything exact. It's okay for me to be in conundrum. It's okay for me to be unsure of things. It's okay for me to think, I got a dozen different things I could do with my life. I don't know which one I'd really rather do. They're all awesome or something like this. But also thinking of yourself along many different ways, learning to be capable of seeing yourself as in many different roles, as a leader, as a follower, as a person who can be a friend, as a person who can be a help, as a person who can receive help. Find yourself to be in many, many different roles with many different people and grow comfortable with that role and find a way of being in that role without ever compromising being who you are. Well, that's pretty much it in a nutshell, I guess. It took us 3 shows to get there. But I did want to talk to this. So next time somebody, you may still never have a clear sense of that. Just who do you think you are? But knowing how you got to where it is you are, this might be a way of helping you to grab a healthier, more vibrant sense of yourself. We do have one more viewer comment. I found what Bob's saying to be true in my life for sure. When I finally figured out who I was, or at least started figuring it out, that's when my life took the most positive turns. Awesome. Yeah, that's certainly my testimony. And I hope that each of you learn to love being you. I think God loves you. I love you. I hope you love you. And I think you'll find that a lot of other people will admire and love you too when you're just who you are, because you're fine, you're perfect, you're well suited to life, just being you. Anyhow, this is Bob Greaves, the Unconventional Pastor, and I'll see you next Sunday.